So it's no secret that I bought the Fujifilm XT5, and I can confidently say that this is all I need for my lifestyle and portraiture images this year. And if you are a regular viewer of the channel, you'll know that I have been deep into the Sony full frame and APS-C ecosystem for all my professional and leisure photography. And I've covered this in a previous video that I'm just tired and uninspired to shoot creative images with my work cameras, and I also don't want to travel with a heavy and expensive setup. So that's why the Fujifilm X-T5 is all I need for my leisure photography this year, and here are my first impressions. One thing that really excites me about including a new mount system is having the opportunity to build a minimal set of lenses purely for photography. And this might sound ironic, but when going out to shoot for fun on the A7 IV, I have a really tough time with picking what lenses to bring. I have multiple mid-range and telephoto zooms, and every prime lens from a 24 to a 135mm. But with the Fujifilm X mount, I have gone back to the basics with some photography gear advice that I wish I listened to when I started photography. First up here, I've got the 27mm f2.8 pancake lens. This is a decent lens that's more of a everyday carry lens, and I've been using it when I don't really want to take out my camera sling and the day isn't geared towards photography and more spending time with family and friends and having that ability to capture authentic moments. It's also conveniently a 40mm in full frame terms, which is a focal length that I have really gelled with recently. Next up is my first ever kit lens that I've ever owned, and that's the 18-55 f2 to f4. Meaning that it is a variable aperture lens, so as you zoom, the f-stop changes. And at the 55mm N, f4 isn't the most desirable fast aperture that I'm used to, and it is providing a nice limitation and learning curve. Because with my photography, I'm focusing on using lighting and layers to create depth, rather than cheating with a dreamy out of focus background to isolate my subject. And this is an extremely versatile lens with the full frame field of view of 28 to about an 85mm. And lastly, this is the Viltrox 27mm f1.2. And I took this lens out yesterday on a portrait shoot with my new friend Lani, and I'm extremely impressed with the performance of this lens, and I'm really happy with these images. It definitely has some of the best and smooth out of focus bokeh that I've ever seen from an APS-C lens, and wide open at f1.2, it's sharp, it has good contrast, and also has this really nice flare. Now, I have had one small issue with the autofocus, but after a firmware update, that kind of seems to be fixed now, as well as providing a profile correction in Lightroom. And a quick note guys, all of these images are edited with my Lightroom presets. So if you like how I edit and you want to emulate this timeless filmic look, check out the link below. And if you sign up to my newsletter, you'll get 25% off your first order. So I'm following old photography advice of getting a versatile mid-range zoom and a fast prime lens with a versatile focal length, rather than falling into this trap of content creation hype of having every possible focal length. So I want to share some of my first impressions of the XT5 and some of the problems or limitations that I've had when picking up this camera. Firstly, the form factor of this style of body is great. It's small and compact, but grips well in the hand, even when you're using larger lenses like the Viltrox 27mm f1.2, and it's definitely the most aesthetic camera that I've ever owned. I will say that while these tactile dials look great, I don't use them as I leave the ISO and shutter speed switched to A and the EV comp to C. This is the configuration for aperture priority, my main shooting mode without a flash, and the front dial here is for EV compensation, which is great as it is the same on my Sony cameras. I love how the screen flips up and out, making it ideal for photography and encourages me to shoot more landscape images, which is something that I've struggled with to shoot in the past. The image quality is just great, and with the 40 megapixel APS-C sensor and their image processing technology, it really solves a few issues that I've had with APS-C cameras in the past. You just get so much color depth, which is a beautiful starting point for editing the raw files. The dynamic range is pretty insane. Being able to recover that much detail in the shadows and highlights on an APS-C sensor is very impressive. And I've been using the DR200 setting, and this is basically an HDR image as it does blend two exposures with a lower and higher ISO together. And a lot of people, including myself, thought that this was only applied to the JPEGs, but it does in fact apply to the raw image, giving you more detail in the shadows and highlights with a very clean look. But for whatever reason, it looks completely natural and not like a typical HDR image. So with correct editing, you can mimic that film look with a nice highlight roll off. Now, I do edit all of my raw images, but I enjoy shooting raw plus JPEG as I'm loving the Astia Soft, as it is a very close look to what my presets are, and it's extremely inspiring to see what an edited image will look like while I'm out shooting. Fuji's auto white balance hasn't always been the best, but I do tint the auto white balance to +4 in the reds and -4 in the blues. This just gives me a much better white balance to start from while editing, while the default is too cool for my taste. So I love the image quality, and I love how Fujifilm have this unique approach with their X-Trans sensor pixel layout and also their DR function, providing me with some fantastic raw files to edit from. Now, I have had a few problems with the XT5 just randomly freezing, and you have to remove the battery to fix it. And this is a pretty known issue with the XT5, and I hope there will be a firmware update to fix this. I've also been getting this flicker of exposure as I take a photo while I'm in one of the DR modes. Basically, I think it's showing a higher ISO exposure briefly as you just press the shutter, making you think you've overexposed the image. But then when you go to review the image, the exposure just looks great. Also coming from Sony cameras, the XT5's autofocus is definitely not as good, as one thing that is annoying is the tracking box. You can't customize the size, and it never actually fully locks on, as it does this little dance, and sometimes it will just completely dance off the screen, which has been kind of annoying for myself. And I'm going to be missing using this little wireless hot shoe mic on my Sony cameras, as I love having a little bit of scratch audio for my B-roll, and I definitely won't be using this massive wired mic from Rode. So guys, I'm really excited for this year, and next week I'm going to South Korea for a photography trip with a few mates, and I'm really looking forward to seeing what I'll be able to capture with this new photo setup. So if you enjoyed this video, make sure you subscribe for more fun content, and we'll see you next week.